now a controversial program is flying tens of thousands of migrants into the U.S.
The program allows up to 30,000 asylum seekers every month to be flown from 4 countries: Venezuela, Nicaragua.
So a new twist emerges in America's immigration crisis, a program of flights bringing people into the country from several different places, and it was all a big secret until recently.
Customs and Border Patrol data showing that 357,000 migrants have been flown into the U.S.
They're going to states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Louisiana. Other flights we just haven't been able to track. It's impossible.
Desperation was a common emotion we found in northern Mexico, where tens of thousands of migrants are waiting for a chance to come to the U.S.
The migrants in this CHNV program are able to apply for asylum. There are strict eligibility requirements, though, for this program, including having a supporter in the United States.
The migrants who are coming here, are they generally wanting to come to the U.S.?
Yes. Like 90%.
92%.
Yes.
More than 161,000 migrants flew into 4 of Florida's major airports. That means Florida received 80% of all the migrant flights.
This is not new. This is a part of everyday procedures. There's nothing mysterious or nefarious about it.
I want to show you how we've been able to get the video. We found this one little spot where there's barbed wire, but you can see through and you can see the charter planes.
So a controversial program flying people into America was recently expanded at the start of 2024. But even though this program might be legal, what nobody's talking about is that the 300,000 people brought into the country by air is just a small drop in the bucket compared to the estimated 3 million border encounters the country experienced last year. A border experiencing the largest humanitarian crisis of our lifetimes, where critics say cartels make money charging people fleeing extreme poverty for help navigating their way to America, and where once they arrive, they can travel to one of the country's many sanctuary cities like New York, where they can find offers of permanent shelter for families, medical care, and most importantly, caseworkers that will assist people with applications for asylum and work permissions so that they can get started here. And immigration officials say these flights are part of a program to lower border crossings, free up customs officials, and increase security. On top of that, there's talk of expanding a similar program to help refugees from war-torn areas of the Middle East, specifically Gaza. And this has many people asking, what's the real reason all of these programs are being implemented to bring people into the country? Are they different from how the U.S. has done things in the past? Are they sustainable? And is there something else going on here that doesn't meet the eye? Because obviously people have been able to get into the country without a flight from as far away as Africa and China. Now, proponents say the secret programs we're going to uncover are a good thing because they help people in need, plus they're being done in line with previous immigration efforts the country has put forth in the past. But critics say this is an election year, and although these programs might decrease traffic at the southern border, they're not actually solving the problem, which they say makes them part of the problem. So here we are at New York City's Port Authority bus terminal, and this program of flights has already delivered 15,000 people to this city. And just like the Texas program that bused people here, 30,000, you can get a bus from the airport right here, and it is a major arrival destination. But unlike the interstate drama that took place between New York and Texas, this program is federal. And what exactly makes it controversial, and why is it a big secret?
Fox News obtained Department of Homeland Security documents that break down the asylum seekers parole program. The program allows up to 30,000 asylum seekers every month to be flown to the U.S. from 4 countries: Venezuela, Nicaragua.
So the focus has been on this parole program since the start of this year, but it's actually existed since 2023, and it's not a program that's open to the entire world. It only affects a small number of specific countries. Now, the federal government says this program is designed to limit congestion at the southern border, and it's designed to make things more manageable down at the border with the limited resources the country has right now. That's its own issue worth discussing, but many reports indicate this program is designed to streamline travel from places where most of the people coming in get denied. And from a logistical sense, if you know you've got a large group of people who, when they come here, usually get turned around, and you have other groups of people from other places where that doesn't usually happen, this creates traffic jams that the country is having trouble dealing with. And what nobody's talking about is that there are legitimate immigration consequences for people who are supposed to use this program and try to go around it. And the first of those is that if you try to enter the country and your country's part of this special program, they'll flat out deny you. Plus, it handles all of the vetting in those host countries, which has people asking, is this a pilot program? Should it be expanded? And the second consequence is it threatens people who find their way into the country around this program with deportation.
For the very first time Internal DHS data reveals the U.S. cities that hundreds of thousands of Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan migrants have flown into via a controversial mass parole program. The DHS data was obtained.
Now, for some reason, it appears that the details of this program were not loudly broadcast to the entire world, which is why it appears to be very secretive. Some people say that's because the program is being used for another purpose, and that it needed to be a secret in order not to make people upset. But the people running it have now said that it needed to be kept secretive because this is immigration we're talking about here, and if you broadcast something like this to the entire world, people might abuse it. We've got bad actors, we have enemies on a national scale that could look at this and say, oh, we want to infiltrate, but is that the real reason this is happening? And if this program is designed to speed things up and lower congestion at the border, why isn't it happening in more places than just these 4 countries?
It's all part of a special program called the CHNV Parole Program that grants migrants 2 years of humanitarian parole. And several
Interesting. So it looks like people admitted under this program get 2 years in the country, and then they've either got to reapply or they get deported. And in addition to passing a background check, people in the program also need a U.S.-based sponsor. And the U.S. sponsor requirement could be why many of the people in this program got sent to certain places instead of others. For example, Florida was a top destination state. However, the top origin countries, Haiti, Venezuela, Cuba, maybe that's where the support people were located. Also, New York, number 3 destination, big international city, colder weather, yes, but lots of people here from those countries as well. But due to the secret nature of this travel program and the fact that all of the details were only obtained via Freedom of Information Act request, critics say that gives the whole thing a reason to look very suspect. But it very well may be that the large number of travelers getting sent to Florida is a byproduct of the program's other requirements, and not necessarily indication this is being used in any political manner.
More than 161,000 migrants flew into 4 of Florida's major airports. That means Florida received 80% of all the migrants.
Now, whether this is all a coincidence or a part of this whole process and how it's intended to work is tough to tell. But one thing's for sure, no right-leaning state would be in favor of such a program. And fascinatingly, nobody in New York is upset about this, even though it's very similar to the Texas bus program, which the city tried to shut down earlier. One thing's for sure, the people in this program, they're fleeing extreme poverty, they're fleeing oppressive communist regimes, and those are situations that most people should be able to empathize with. And it now appears a similar type of program might be opened up to refugees from Gaza, where there is also an ongoing humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, but that's not a new crisis. And people want to know, why is this program coming out now if that crisis has been going on for months?
CBS News has obtained internal federal documents that could allow some Palestinian refugees to enter the United States.
Now, this plan would provide a safe haven for certain people looking to flee Gaza. CBS News.
So with the recent protests that took over college campuses all across the country, especially here in New York, some people think it seems odd that there's now an announcement about refugees from Gaza at this specific point in time. At the same time, the United States also has many other refugee programs that give people a fresh start in America when their home country descends into chaos. But the point is, this program is not at all out of line with things that the country's done in the past, and to some, it is the logical extension of current programs just like it, like what we're seeing with the program of flights. But there are some who say this is a political move designed to appease those who think the U.S. is partially responsible for what's happening in the Middle East because of the country's support for Israel. On top of that, all levels of government condemned the riots that took place at universities like Columbia right here as not being peaceful or good for society in any way. And they say that's why you fast forward a week later and now you have a new refugee program. But the situation in Gaza, that is an undeniable humanitarian crisis, and that makes people wonder, why is something happening now if it's not political? However, in spite of all the criticism this new idea has received, proponents of it are actually criticizing it because they say it won't go far enough to actually help people, and the administration says, you know, a lot of this depends on countries like Egypt and Israel to help us out. They may not be willing to. And even though we want to help, our hands are tied.
Another proposal involves getting additional Palestinians out of war-torn Gaza and then processing them again as refugees. We understand that this potential eligible population is fairly narrow and relatively small, but they would come to...
Now, obviously, this program coming to light just after the revelations of the program of flights it doesn't look great. But what most people don't know is that it's only going to affect a small number of people who may even be eligible to begin with. First of all, it's a refugee resettlement program, not an immigration program. People in the program have the requirement of a US-based sponsor. And unlike the migration-related programs, this will provide a legitimate pathway to citizenship for people who come in. And although an exact figure on how many people this is actually going to affect hasn't been released, previously the program has helped about 400,000 folks enter the United States from various countries over the last 10 years. And only 600 of those individuals were from Palestine, 56 of whom entered the country in 2023. And it remains to be seen what kind of a difference this program would actually make, because the US can't even do it alone, even if they implement it.
Right now, it is very difficult to get people out of Gaza due to the war there and the restrictions that Egypt and Israel have placed on people leaving. Any of these plans would require the consent of the government in Egypt, which so far...
So because this program would take place in an area of the world that is sandwiched between two borders, Israel and Egypt, that are both under a lot of pressure, this program won't be able to succeed without the help of those two countries. It's doubtful how much help Israel would be to the United States if a program like this were to take off. And so far, Egypt has kept its border with Gaza closed, and the ramifications of suddenly opening that border aren't fully known at this point. And that brings us back to the politics of all of this. Is it a real plan, or is it designed to sound like a real plan that won't actually work so that people are happy without actually making anybody upset? Is that what we're talking about here?
The administration, as you know, has already been facing significant political challenges, as illustrated by these protests and demonstrations across many universities and colleges here. It is also important to note that this could pose an awkward political situation with Israel because...
So when you consider the limited effect that this program would probably have, even if it took off, we're probably talking about a lot less people than the secretive flights program, which in and of itself might not make things perfect at the southern border, but might end up making them a little bit more manageable. But that's why some people are saying this program is political. It's designed to make people think the US is on the side of Gaza, or at least is somewhat unbiased in who it supports in that current zone of conflict. Kind of like how when politicians say they want to lower people's taxes, but what they end up doing is just arranging how the tax system works so that it looks lower to some people and ends up being higher to others. Nobody gets upset, or maybe everybody does. And those critical of US immigration say this is what we're seeing all across the country, not just from the federal government, but also in sanctuary cities like New York City that claim to be immigrant friendly. And they say this reveals the true beneficiaries of systems that claim to help as many people as possible, but may actually not end up doing that. Now, although the federal government's role in this asylum crisis is somewhat dubious, New York City, things here have been 100% political from day one. To give you an example, 15,000 people have come here under the secret flights program, but the Texas program that brought people here, that brought about 30,000 people. Why was that such a big problem when the secret flights program has gotten no attention here? Everyone in New York was talking about how Texas was ruining New York City by sending people here who didn't even want to come. And then the federal government sends half the amount of people here in half the amount of time, and then nobody seems to care.
One thing it did do was it shed light on the problem and it forced the issue. It forced some of these governors, some of these mayors in these sanctuary cities to actually talk about the issue, actually force the federal.
So New York City has a right to shelter law, which says it is illegal to transport people to New York for the purposes of them claiming right to shelter. That's why they sued Texas bus companies, but here the federal government does the same thing, and I don't see New York City suing the federal government or the airlines. And this has people claiming America's largest sanctuary city isn't really what it claims to be. Because after all, aren't things so much better here than in Texas that we should be willing to help people relocate? And believe it or not, New York City actually sealed off its bus terminal, so buses from Texas would have to give 48-hour notice, schedule everything in advance, greatly limiting the number of people that could take a bus here. But of course, it's pretty easy to come to New York City by car or by train or by plane, and people have been doing just that. And this blockade hasn't stopped people from coming here. We're still receiving around 1,000 people a week because one of New York's sanctuary city laws, the right to shelter policy, is still in effect. And it is overwhelmingly supported by 80% of New York residents, which means the idea of fleeing a terrible country like Venezuela is acceptable, but fleeing a terrible place like Texas, not acceptable. And just as people say the Texas governor was playing politics by sending people to New York in the first place, it looks like that's something everybody is doing with this crisis. Meanwhile, real people are in the middle of it. And that's probably why the country is not the least bit unified in how it's handling this. And that's why we've got everything from sanctuary cities to states that have laws that want to lock up people who cross the border. All the while, a massive asylum industrial complex is growing right under everyone's nose. And you've got companies like the Texas bus companies, which made millions bringing people here, as well as the shelters here in New York, which are now revolving door operations, accepting hosting people for 30 days and then evicting them just so new people can come in. In fact, a New York City bankrupt hotel was saved from insolvency and from being torn down by being rented out and turned into shelters. The massive Roosevelt Hotel, 1,000 rooms. It is now the welcome center for all asylum seekers here in New York City. That place was bankrupt, it was closed, and the asylum crisis is the best thing to ever happen to it. There's a lot of money invested in keeping this crisis going. Also, businesses may end up benefiting from it as well. At least they think that they will. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, America is missing 1.7 million workers. They say the country has 8.8 million job openings, but only 6.4 million people that could potentially fill those jobs. And according to the Chamber of Commerce, since 2020, 120,000 businesses temporarily closed. And although many of them have ended up reopening, right now they're in a bit of a problem, which is that they aren't able to find enough workers to fill open positions and fully get back to where they were or where they could have been. And right now in this country, we've got a whole bunch of different competing interests. We've got some forces that would like this to keep going on forever. There are some forces that want it to stop immediately. And even though this program of secret flights was not something that was openly broadcast, upon investigation, it sounds like there may in fact be more checks and balances with that than there are at the actual border itself. Do you think this is a good idea for the country? Should this be rolled out further? And are there forces operating behind the scenes, like businesses with all the money that they're making, that have a vested interest in this crisis continuing to grow at levels the country's not prepared for? Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.